Well, well, well. Look who's decided to jump ship before the Titanic, that is formerly Facebook, now Meta, hits the iceberg of truth. It's none other than Nick Clegg, the former UK Deputy Prime Minister and a key player in Facebook's censorship practices, announcing his departure on X like he's leaving a party no one invited him to in the first place. Was this his masterstroke to dodge the intense scrutiny that's about to descend with the Trump train pulling into the White House in just 2 weeks? Or maybe he got caught with his hands too deep in the censorship collusion cookie jar with the Biden administration, along with Prince Harry. And just when you thought the drama and distraction couldn't get any more transparent, here comes Thomas Markle, the sequel no one asked for in the royal soap opera, stirring the pot because, apparently, we haven't had our fill of the Markle family drama. What better way to divert attention from Meghan's Instagram Netflix trailer disaster, as well as the dubious activities of Harry and Meghan's Archewell Fugazi public charity? Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming full circle, and the rats are jumping ship, spinning new fake narratives to shove down all our throats. Their aim? Saving face and dodging the spotlight, obviously from U.S. authorities. If these two think they can sweep the past 4 years of pure hell under the rug, they're in for a rude awakening. So get comfy because TRG is going to fill you in on the stuff that matters, the things they desperately don't want you talking about. This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Today, we're delving beyond the surface, exploring depths that I previously haven't really touched. And I assure you, these revelations are about to kick you in the teeth. So let's begin with this guy that you see on your screen. That's Nick Clegg. I've previously referenced him in my analysis of how Harry and Meghan have seemingly impacted and meddled with the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment and American civil liberties over the past 4 years. Hopefully by now, many of you are aware of my playlist, Stand Up for Free Speech, where it contains almost 100 videos documenting and going over the ways that Harry and Meghan have been involved with this censorship complex. If you take the time to look at it, you will see that it's not conspiracy. It's all based in fact and information that's coming directly from the U.S. government. Everyone knows that this is a topic that YouTube absolutely hates me talking about, hence the reason why this channel is being treated the way that it is, which makes me want to see justice and fight for this even more. Individuals who violate human rights, and for Americans, the divine inalienable rights, should face consequences. Harry and Meghan should not be exempt from that. Without accountability, these liberties could be lost in time. Trump's election does not mean these totalitarian globalist figures will halt their attempts to suppress your voice. If it's happening to me today, it could very well happen to you tomorrow. But anyway, I digress. Getting back to Nick Clegg. Here is what this guy stands for. Tell me if you recognize any of the language that he's using.
First of all, thank you, each and every single one of you, for coming on this march, for staying here, for standing up for the values of openness, of pluralism, of tolerance, of internationalism, and standing up for a European Union, which of course is not flawless, but has done so much to safeguard the peace and prosperity of our wonderful continent. It was a choice to pull us out of the customs union. It was a choice to embark on that demeaning act of transatlantic obsequiousness as she rushed across the Atlantic to hold the hand of Donald Trump. And it was a choice. It was a choice that she has taken to ignore you and to ignore 16.1 million people. That is more than have ever voted for a winning party in a British general election. She has chosen to ignore you, and that must not stand. The final question we need to ask ourselves today is, what do we now do? What do we do in the weeks and months and years ahead? And in my view, the most important thing of all is this. We have to hold these people to account. They have told the British people that they will receive £350 million per week in the NHS as we leave the European Union. They have told the British people that an economic utopia beckons. They have told the British people that a plethora of new, sparkling new trade agreements across the world, from Papua New Guinea to the United States, beckons as we destroy those precious trade links in our own European Union. But above all, we need to hold them to account for this. And this is the final and most important thought I want to leave with you. Young people don't want hard Brexit. Young people voted in huge numbers. They did not abstain. They did not abstain, as the right-wing commentariat keeps saying. They came out in huge numbers, and 3/4 more of young people between the ages of 18 and 24 said, no, we don't want to leave the European Union. This is not the future we want. And we need to hold this government, and we need to hold the Brexit press, and we need to hold these unaccountable vested interests in the Daily Mail and all those rotten newspapers to account, because they are driving our country towards a future which those who have to inhabit the future do not want. So hold them to account for the sake of our children and our grandchildren.
Nick Clegg is not just any former British politician. He was the leader of the Liberal Democrats, once sharing governmental power with David Cameron in the UK. Moreover, his influence extended into the digital realm, having joined Meta, formerly known as Facebook, in 2018 as Vice President of Global Affairs and Communications, and then later ascending to President of Global Affairs in 2022. Nick Clegg's primary job function was shaping Meta's policy landscape, particularly in the realm of content moderation, otherwise what we call censorship. As President of Global Affairs, he led Facebook's dialogue with international governments, including the United States, advocating for Meta's position on various policy issues, including privacy, freedom of expression, and the contentious area of content moderation, aka censorship. Nick Clegg and Facebook came under fire when the Facebook files had exposed where internal documents revealed the inner workings of Meta's content moderation decisions. Those leaks exposed how the company, under Clegg's oversight, sometimes erred on the side of overzealous moderation, you think? Leading to accusations of censorship and the suppression of free speech. Clegg himself has acknowledged the high error rates in content moderation, admitting that Meta's policies occasionally got in the way of free expression. Oopsie. Especially during high-stakes events like elections and the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Oh, and of course, anyone talking about Meghan Markle and questioning her pregnancy. So now hold that thought on what was happening to the Megxit community and so many of us who were getting deplatformed, demonetized, stalked, harassed, and in some cases, criminally hacked by the Sussex squad as a result of having access to someone behind the scenes to give that information. Under the stewardship of Nick Clegg, Meta's content moderation took on a decidedly partisan hue. If you weren't part of the so-called Sussex terrorist squad, the digital enforcers for Harry and Meghan, or if you dared to voice an opinion contrary to Meghan's liking, you'd find yourself subjected to trolling, verbal abuse, mass reporting, and ultimately exclusion from commenting, communities, or even the platform itself. Meanwhile, the Sussex terrorist squad enjoyed unfettered freedom with the added capability to access personal information causing considerable harm, all under Clegg's watch. I would argue that an overwhelmingly likelihood, nearly a certainty, that Clegg was fully aware of these activities and chose to look the other way. And the reason why I believe that is based off of a couple of factors. The first factor is about understanding what Nick Clegg's perspective and view is about free speech. Keep in mind, he's not American, so he doesn't have the same passion that Americans have in protecting our constitutional rights. His perspective as a liberal Democrat in the UK held a very vocal position about the need for transparency in content moderation, yet his tenure has been marred by accusations of inconsistency. For instance, he advocated for a public interest defense for journalists in the UK, suggesting a nuanced approach to regulation that protects journalism in the public interest. However, at Facebook, there have been instances where content critical of certain political figures like Trump or movements was disproportionately moderated, leading to accusations of hypocrisy in how free speech is applied. Moreover, Clegg's alignment with figures like Tony Blair on issues like Brexit and his previous criticisms of government overreach and privacy, juxtaposed with his role in a company accused of similar privacy invasions, paints a picture of a man who perhaps adjusts his principles to suit his current position or employer or his pocket. If you notice, these are similar themes that Prince Harry bangs on about, always talking about wanting transparency and giving access to researchers like Rene DiResta. Going back to this speech that Nick Clegg gave, what you notice was the focus on the youth, talking about the younger generation and what they should demand and what they should ask for in their future and holding authority to account. These are all similar themes that we hear Prince Harry and Meghan bang on about.
Towards a future which those who have to inhabit the future do not want. So hold them to account for the sake of our children and our grandchildren.
And the reason why this feels so oddly familiar is because James Holt, yes, James Holt, the executive director of Archewell Fugazi Public Charity and former Palace spokesman, is responsible. He was the right-hand man to Nick Clegg. James Holt was the strategic mastermind behind Nick Clegg's public persona during his tenure as deputy prime minister. So what we saw up on that stage and him being so animated targeting the youth, that was all Jimmy. First and foremost, Holt was Clegg's head of communications. This wasn't just about sending out press releases. It was about crafting the entire communication strategy for Nick Clegg, and by extension, the Liberal Democrats. He was the architect behind Clegg's public image, managing all aspects of media relations and messaging during a pivotal time when the party was navigating the complexities of a coalition government. James Holt also served as Clegg's media advisor, advising on how Clegg should engage with journalists and shaped responses for him, as well as got him ready for interviews and public appearances. He also managed crisis communication and did policy communication for him. I mean, the full gamut here in the political spectrum on how to shape and deliver narratives as well as align with whatever agendas that need to be aligned with in messaging out to the public. Now that you understand a little bit more of James Holt's background, when we look at his experience and what he was doing in the government sector, such as creating and navigating public perception of the Liberal Democrats, as well as serving as a political strategist and narrative shaper, James Holt was Nick Clegg's right-hand man up until 2017. Then he moved over to the Royal Foundation because Nick Clegg did not get elected for another term. At that point, he was working with the royals, and then Harry and Meghan decided to kidnap him and bring him over to the United States to then do the very same thing that he was doing for Nick Clegg. Knowing that James Holt's background is in media as well as political strategy, you cannot dismiss that Harry and Meghan are not involved in politics in some way. Here, James Holt is in the Netflix mockumentary openly supporting the Sussex's false narratives and the attacks on the institution. Then you also have him being behind the scenes and having connection to Facebook and seeing everything that was going on to so many of us in this community, you can't help but now put James Holt under a microscope to understand his involvement with the censorship industrial complex. Clearly, he was on board with everything that Boozy was doing, Safiya Noble and those algorithms of oppression, Harry and the Aspen Institute. I mean, he is the executive director of the Archwell Fugazi Public Charity, and it's his name that has been signed on the IRS 990. Under penalties of perjury, James Holt is declaring that he has examined the returns for 2021, 22, and 23, including a company's schedules and statements, and to his best knowledge and belief, it is true, correct, and complete, which means James Holt understands very well the funds that are moving in and out of this Fugazi organization, particularly contributing towards funding censorship. Now, I have talked about James Holt before and his stupidity for taking on the responsibility of certifying this IRS document as accurate, correct, to his best knowledge. Should the day come, and it is coming, that the IRS is going to be knocking on Archwell Fugazi Public Charity's door or empty office to do an audit, I almost wonder if the strategy is, look, we'll just play stupid because you're British, because that's where he's from, and say you didn't know and hope that they give them a free pass. Or are they just going to completely skip town, go back to the UK, and nothing ever happened? Something tells me that there is a loophole somewhere in here that James Holt might be thinking he could take. In my opinion, anyone that went along with supporting these false narratives that Harry and Meghan were pushing out on purpose in these disinformation campaigns to now fuel and drive censorship is also a liar. And I would classify James Holt in that category because he sat there on that Netflix show and went along to support the divisive race-baiting narrative, all to further this Marxist anti-American agenda. To me, I see James Holt equally as an enemy to the United States, especially if he is supporting Archwell, which is funding censorship. In addition to Prince Harry, James Holt now needs to be questioned and investigated. 4 years ago, I don't think anyone associated with this couple could have predicted the outcome of what we're seeing today. But something tells me that Team Sussex is 5 steps ahead. Don't be surprised if we hear in the next month or so, James Holt has moved on to another position somewhere back in the UK. Central to this con of the century is Prince Harry's mission in America, which I full-heartedly believe was aimed at undermining one of the bedrock principles of the United States, our First Amendment. His efforts, as we have seen in the Archwell Fugazi tax returns, funding organizations to support censorship initiatives with the goal of influencing U.S. policy and regulation at both state and federal levels. But this grand scheme hit a significant roadblock that they didn't see coming when Elon Musk acquired Twitter. I can't reiterate how important Musk's takeover of the platform was. It wasn't just a business transaction. It literally was a revelation. It exposed, and this is a fact, you can go to the U.S. government website and read the final report for yourself, describing a military-grade psychological operations in the digital realm. Operations designed to manipulate not just information, but the very behavior and cognitive decisions of the public. A heavy focus and intent was controlling the narrative around elections, particularly to prevent Donald Trump from reclaiming office. Other areas included COVID-19, climate change, racial, social issues. I guess Megxit fell into that category. Obviously, it's the indoctrination and driving the ideological behaviors that advance this globalist agenda. And this agenda is not something I'm making up. Many of you are experiencing it elsewhere. It paints a picture of a deliberate effort to shape public discourse, to dictate what information should be consumed, and ultimately to engineer human behavior and political outcomes. The battle for free speech, it seems, has become a battleground for ideological control, and Harry's involvement suggesting a strategic move to align American policy with what some may call a more controlled, less democratic vision of information freedom. For the time being, Elon Musk has put a wrench in Harry's mission, but that doesn't mean Harry and Meghan have given up. We know that Harry and Meghan have pivoted their censorship strategy towards focusing on the kids and exploiting the online harms in order to use that as the Trojan horse to get us closer to this digital ID world in order to implement the various things that they have in store for us, like social credit score, like vaccination passports, like controlling our bank and our money. And what we saw in 2024 was a dramatic shift with Harry and Meghan and their focus. Instead of doing work domestically and trying to destroy American civil liberties, they decided to take their little circus internationally. And we saw that in Colombia and we saw it in Nigeria, using mental health and the kids again in order to sneak in the need for driving regulation on controlling and putting safeguards. Love that word, safeguards. By the time Harry and Meghan got to Colombia, it seemed to somewhat start to stick, but that didn't last too long because right then in November, Donald Trump wins the election and drops the bomb of all bombs by saying he's going to be launching a thorough investigation into every aspect and corner of the censorship industrial complex, meaning the government agencies, the NGOs, the think tanks, the universities, where funding's going, as well as the social media companies and the people that they have been involved with. So right now, I think Harry and Meghan's world is a little upside down, in my opinion. We're seeing Nick Clegg no longer at Facebook. I do believe that he didn't just say, I'm going to step down and do something else. I think maybe that was not his decision. And what we're starting to see now are people's loose ends starting to tie up, which leads us into the next topic of this video, which is the news that was dropped by Thomas Markle yesterday in the media space. Probably by now you've seen this ridiculous headline and people are talking about it, but yep, apparently Thomas Markle Sr. did another interview with the Daily Mail. The lucky journalist who was special enough to get this exclusive was none other than journalist Carolyn Graham, and we'll get to her in a second. But she reveals that Meghan's father wants everybody to know that he is leaving America and going to Southeast Asia. This 80-year-old man, who we have been repeatedly told and made to feel bad if we even question any of the inconsistencies of the fact that he is very sick and knocking on death's door, is now all of a sudden going to pick up and just hop, skip, and jump all the way over to Southeast Asia, where he has no family, no friends, and just going to live out his life in hopes to meet new people. Before I get into this article, let me just share with you this brief conversation I had with the Duchess of Sussex in November of 2024, literally 2 months ago. And what I shared with her, based off of everything that we know and how things are going, was my Vegas bet as to what was going to happen in 2025 concerning the dastardly duo and how it's all going to go down. Now, I have to preface, and this is my opinion only and speculation. This is not based off of any type of insider information that many of you think that I have. This is based off of paying attention to what has been going on and being extremely meticulous with details. This is just me coming to my own conclusion, and this is what I see. I see with Harry and Meghan, it's going to be very simple. This is all going to come down to the outcome of that security case. This is not about Harry getting his protection back. Harry has security and protection. We're paying for it here in the United States. What Harry wants is his status back. And that status is key because it protects him from being criminally prosecuted, such as if he was to be called to Congress to answer for how he knew about J6 or to answer about his involvement with trying to violate Americans' First Amendment rights. This is why I'm like a dog with a bone daily talking about it. Because in 15 days, we're going to have a new administration, and this administration promises to put a stop to what has been going on with these NGOs and the dark money and the foreign influence. And it's my hope that Harry and Meghan and all the people who have participated in this psychological warfare unleashed onto innocent, unsuspecting people face consequences for the harm that they caused. These disinformation attack campaigns not only affected people's mental psyche, but also it jeopardized and threatened people's physical safety. These two multimillionaires found gratification by taking away other people's right to earn income, all because they didn't like what the person had to say. And because of their douchebaggery, they preferred to see people suffer. But I do believe that they think they're going to get this status back and not going to be held accountable for any of it. Now, on the other hand, if Harry doesn't get the status back, then my prediction is Harry will take off to the UK and we'll never see him back, and he's going to leave Meghan. Or Harry and Meghan are really going to go to Portugal to avoid being subpoenaed. Until that court case is decided, we've got all this other bullshit that we're going to be dealing with. Now, that's the short term for Harry and Meghan, but I do think long term, the plans for 2025 is figuring out how to extrapolate Harry out of the US and back home and in a place where he can get back on track. I do believe that there are active plans in process trying to get Harry back home and away from this toxicity. I also believe that there are current strategic talks that are happening about the various narratives that they're going to be pushing out as propaganda in order to get us out of this psychological operation nightmare that had literally blew up in Harry and Meghan's face. And I told Duchess of Sussex in November that I believe that Thomas Markle is going to be the first one to go in being phased out of this storyline. And I said that because Samantha Markle popped up in that interview with the Daily Mail, dangling the carrot of her father being at death's door and may not have much longer to live since Markle men don't live past 80. I mean, we've been hearing about this for the past 5 years, and here we are. And now we get this notice that he is going to go off into the sunset into Southeast Asia without a location defined. And I did tell Duchess of Sussex that one of the Markle siblings are going to end up going with him. I predicted that it would have been Samantha, but being that she has this court case, it's Tom Jr. And sure enough, in this article, Tom Jr. is heading off into the sunset with his dad. Do I think we will hear from them again? We might if there is a necessity to bring them back up, but for now, I don't think so. I think they're going to go off quietly and go back to whatever it is that they were doing before because, they were telling us that Thomas Markle lived in Rosarito. Well, do some research, folks. Take a look at the bankruptcy papers and see that there's no property listed or monthly payment that Thomas Markle is making to any property in Rosarito unless he lied on the bankruptcy forms. But I'm just saying, it is my personal sentiment that I'm entitled to that I'm beyond giving any more benefits of the doubt. There have been too many inconsistencies and contradictions that any reasonable person has a right at this point to say, I just don't believe it. I just don't believe what is being told to us anymore. I don't believe Thomas Markle and his story with Meghan, and I don't believe Samantha and her story with Meghan, nor do I believe Tom Jr. and his story with Meghan, because all three of the Markle story with Meghan don't align with each other. And you would think as a family, you would have some memories that were consistent, but not in this case, especially when, Samantha has a book that has been put out and it's her words where there's so many errors, so many contradictions, so many discrepancies with dates between what Thomas Markle says and what Tom Jr. says. At this point, I think any rational, reasonable person can say that they don't buy it. And I hate to say it that it took this long and this amount of courage to step up and say it, but I think anybody who's going to shame anyone who is now coming out and saying that they don't buy these stories, I think needs to take a second look and think about how fooled and stupid you might start looking, because this is beyond ridiculous. The last thing that I want to say about this article, and, after this, go over and check Our Recollections May Vary's video going over this article. But one thing I want to point out here, Caroline Graham, this journalist, apparently Thomas Markle has done quite a few interviews over the years. I mean, a lot of interviews. But the very first interview was with Caroline Graham in breaking, where Thomas Markle was hiding out. But then what I found interesting is that, how Thomas Markle, his relationship with Meghan all blew up in his face when the Daily Mail put out the article of him posing for pictures. And this is what really destroyed the relationship with Thomas and Meghan. But it turns out that this one article that destroyed Thomas Markle's life and now has caused him such heartache that he has to flee to Southeast Asia was released by this very same journalist, Caroline Graham. So, my gorgeous, good-looking friends, I pose to you, if you hated the Daily Mail so much because they ruined your relationship with your daughter that you haven't seen since that whole episode happened, why the fuck would you have the journalists that did that back in your home? I'll leave you on that for you to chew on. But that's all I got, folks. This is gonna get interesting. So we have Thomas Markle and Junior going off into the sunset. I am sure we're going to see, if not already, I haven't seen what was posted online, Samantha Markle pop up with Dan Wooten talking about her dad's exit. And we're going to get it's a shame that he may never see his invisible grandkids. And we'll get the whole song and dance about how Meghan is selfish and she's going to regret it. And then somehow there will be closure and getting the sense that Thomas Markle has accepted that he may never see Meghan again. He won't lose hope, but he's accepted it. And I think that will be the last of it. Unless there's an opportunity for them to come back and be in the spotlight and get paid again. That's just my opinion. But what do you guys think? This story gets wilder and crazier as the days go on. I guarantee this is about to blow up. And I believe that a certain 3-letter agency, as well as another agency internationally, came together and said, you know what? We need to now abort this and wrap this up. So what we're seeing are the phasing out of people. I mean, have we seen Doria? Will we see Doria ever again? My guess is probably not. But here we have Thomas Markle being phased out. Thomas Jr. went along with him. I mean, notice Thomas Jr. has disappeared. He's off into the sunset with his dad. No goodbyes, nothing. I mean, look, allegedly, Thomas Markle Jr.'s mom passed away in September, but Samantha, in an article with the Daily Mail, said she passed in October. So, hey, she could have died twice. Anything's possible. And, how is it going to phase out for Samantha Markle? I think we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with this court case. And I have my own opinions on that, and I'm not going to get into it because, look, at the end of the day, if at face value they look at the case, on the surface, what was done, if this was a real story, in my opinion, what she faced, I think, considers to be defamation. But, it depends on how the court's going to look at it. And, from all the things that they took out, it's anybody's guess as to what's going to happen. But I do believe that once that is over, then we'll start seeing something else. We might have one last hoorah drama with the Markle family, whether it be a funeral and, everybody gets together, or somehow Meghan has a change of heart and we get some, AI video of them. Who knows? But I do think that the mission that Harry keeps talking about has now been aborted, and it's now, how do we take 2025 and get ourselves out of this without exposing what this really was, in my opinion. But definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Such a fraud.